What's good, Rick in here, and on today's video, I want to talk about how you can slash your travel costs in half. Now, I'm really excited to make this video because a lot of my friends have been asking me, how do you travel so much without spending so much money? Last year, I probably took over 30 to 40 flights, and I did it without spending a ton of money. And this video is really important to me because growing up, my family was very middle class, but we still made it a priority to travel quite a bit, and I learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way. So in today's video, I want to share some of those tips and tricks with you. So first and foremost, plan ahead. Now this sounds really obvious, but whenever you can plan ahead, it's surprising to me how often I get a phone call from a friend and they're like, hey Rick, and you're good at finding flights, can you find me a flight to go to London? And I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's log in. When are you looking to go fly? And when are you looking to go there? And they'll be like, I'm thinking of going a week from now or 2 weeks from now. And when you put yourself down to the wire and when you only give yourself a week or 2 or even 3 weeks to book a flight, it's going to be tough. Now, obviously, I'm all for spontaneity. I love last minute travels, but as soon as you have kind of the bare bones laid out, figure that out. So if you know when you're going to be flying into the city and when you're going to be leaving, book that flight ahead of time if you can. If you know specific nights that you're going to need a hotel or an Airbnb or a hostel, book those ahead of time. The savings on those can be huge. And on top of that, you get more options. So a lot of times you'll get a better location for an Airbnb by booking ahead of time. If you wait till the last minute, there just isn't that inventory and you're not going to be able to find it. So if you want to be able to travel on the cheap, plan ahead. That's probably the number one thing you can do. Even if everything else you just kind of ignore, even if you don't really do much, plan ahead. And again, I'm not trying to say you should not be spontaneous. I love spontaneous travel, but when you know there's something well ahead of time, go ahead and plan that out. Number two is do your homework. So when you're going to go ahead and travel to a place, do your homework ahead of time. Figure out what the cheapest place to eat are. Figure out what the best places to stay are. If you're traveling, especially in Europe, figure out what baggage allowances are. On this last trip to London, pretty much all of us, all four of us, got bit by a baggage fee at one point or another because we were flying 4 or 5 different airlines over the course of the trip. There's different baggage allowances on there. And personally, I'll admit, I was pretty busy with finishing up school, graduate school, and working that I didn't really spend as much time doing my homework on these different flight policies. And in the end, that really did bite me. So if you're going to be traveling a lot, if you're doing this trip, do your homework. Figure out, are you going to need to do a currency exchange? Are you going to need to buy tickets ahead of time for something? There's a lot of cases where buying a ticket ahead of time can save you 50 or 60% of the cost. You'll find that with trains. If you book a train ticket ahead of time, you can save a ton of money. Same thing with finding an Airbnb. Figure out what neighborhood you want to be in. The last thing you want to do is go to an Airbnb and find out it's 30 miles from the city center and now you're just stuck in an Airbnb. So there's a ton of benefit to doing your homework when it comes to traveling. This is not to say that you have to go overkill and become an expert on the city before you go there. But if you really want to save some money, do your homework, figure out what your baggage expenses are. Figure out what the details of your flight are going to be. Read those fine print policies. Just go to Reddit. Usually there's a post that says, if you're flying Ryanair, here's what you need to know. Same goes for traveling in the States. If you do your homework, there's a lot of opportunities to save money. Figure out how much you can pack. For example, if you bring too big of a bag on the first flight, you might be stuck with paying a baggage fee every single flight after that. So do your homework. Not everything is the same in every country or every city you go to. So do your homework on that. Same thing when it goes to food. Figure out what cities it costs more to eat out in and cities where it doesn't. And maybe you kind of budget based off of that. I'm big on that. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I think budgeting for your trip is really important. A lot of people just kind of go into autopilot, but we'll circle back to that in just a second. Tip number 3, find a group of friends to travel with. It blows my mind how much you can save by traveling with a few friends. Just adding another friend or adding 2 or 3 friends can make a huge difference in cost. I'll be completely honest, I'm biased here. I don't really like traveling on my own. I don't know what it is about traveling on my own that I've just never enjoyed. I end up finding that when I'm with a group of 3 or 4 people, I just enjoy the process a lot more. Obviously, you can't do exactly what you want when you've got a group of friends, but I personally just enjoyed that whole travel a lot more when there's a group of people with me. But there's a lot of ways that traveling with a group of friends can save you a ton of money. For example, if you've got 4 friends, it might make a lot more sense to rent an Airbnb than it is to stay in a hostel. In a lot of cases, you can save a ton of money that way. Not only do you get to stay in a nicer place, you're spending less money, but on top of that, you might also have a kitchen that you can use that means you can cook your own meals, you can save money that way as well. Again, we'll talk about this a little bit again, but cooking on your own when you're traveling can make a huge difference. When you're traveling with 3 or 4 friends, it makes sense to go out to the grocery store and spend 30 bucks on groceries and cook that way instead of spending 10 bucks per meal on your own. Obviously, when you're on your own, it doesn't make sense to cook every single meal because you'll just spend a ton of time doing that. But when you've got 3 or 4 friends to do that with, it makes a huge difference. Same thing with transportation. If you've got 3 or 4 friends, it might make a lot of sense to rent a car instead of taking a train or flying. When you're flying, you often, especially in Europe, you'll often find that the airport's an hour or 2 from the city. You then have an hour to get through the airport. You spend another hour or 2 in the flight. You land. You take a cab or something to the place you're staying. You've now spent half a day trying to go from city to city when you might just be better off driving that distance. So things like that, where having a group of friends can make a huge difference, not just in terms of saving money, but also in terms of saving time. Before I dive into tip number 4, please go ahead, smash that like button and subscribe. That lets me know that you guys want more of this kind of video on how to travel on a budget. So please go ahead, subscribe. I'd really, really appreciate it. Anyways, tip number 4 is don't go on spending autopilot. It blows my mind how many people go on autopilot as soon as they get on vacation. On a normal day, you would never spend $5 on a bottle of water, but as soon as people get in the airport, they go ahead and buy a $5 bottle of Dasani, and it's totally normal. See my last video about why it's so valuable to have a insulated water bottle. At home, you probably aren't spending $13 on a cocktail, but when people go on vacation, they're like, cool, that's just what it costs, and they start spending 13 bucks on a cocktail every night. When you're at home, you probably aren't eating out 3 meals a day, 7 days a week for 2 or 3 weeks on end, but when you're traveling, people do that all the time. When you're at home, you probably wouldn't spend, $20 on a novelty mug at a thrift store. But people do that all the time when they're traveling to buy a souvenir so they can remember the place. Let's be honest, most of the time your I Love Seattle shirt is going to be at the back of your closet and you're never gonna wear it again. So don't go on spending autopilot. Again, it's okay to splurge a little when you're traveling, but remember that just because you're traveling for a week or 2 does not mean you need to go on autopilot. For me, the best way to travel is to travel as if I'm living there. So I go to a new city and then I start treating it as if this is the place I'm going to be living for the next few weeks. And not only does that allow you to experience the city a little bit more authentically, but it also means that you save more money and you can put that towards your next adventure. You can put that towards your next vacation. So there you have it. Those are my tips for traveling on a budget and hopefully slashing your travel costs in half. I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and as always, I hope you guys learned something. If you guys enjoyed that video, please go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.